We have, these are all of the reports. This is one of the items that was an extra item that was a question that we had, and I believe Craig has the agenda. Okay. Now I've heard that and they grow things.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Join us.
Today is Tuesday, December 14th, 3:30 p.m. We are at the Vets Hall in Morro Bay. This is Wednesday, December 14th, 2016. We are at the Vets Hall. This is the December monthly meeting of the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee. We usually meet on Tuesdays, but due to special scheduling issues, we are meeting today, Wednesday. Welcome, everybody. Noted that we have a quorum present, so we are now ready to begin the agenda. I'll ask for a moment of silent meditation, please. All right, thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate former member Marlis McPherson, sitting in the audience. Marlis has served on the Citizens Finance Committee for quite some time, and since she was recently elected, as I'm sure many of you know, to City Council, she must resign her position here. So we thank her for her service and wish her the very best in her next serving on the City Council. In her place, John Irwin of Morro Bay was appointed last night after he is sworn in and had an opportunity to get caught up on our business. I'm sure John will be actively participating in our future meetings, so we welcome Mr. Irwin as well. Thank you. And all of our other members are present and accounted for. So, first item on the agenda is the review of the fiscal year 2015-16 unaudited transactions from the collection of the general purpose local sales tax, commonly known as Measure Q. I would like to ask for some public comment. Is there any public comment? First of all, is there public comment on any item not on the agenda before I proceed? All right, step forward, please. My apologies. I know we have a timeline tonight, and so I may be trying to move a little too fast.
I'm Janice House from Morro Bay, and I'm here to talk about the proceeds from the sale of the property at the corner of Coral and San Jacinto. And I gave this information to the City Council, and they passed a resolution November 15th, Resolution 75-16, that put you guys as part of the process. So I wanted to give the same information to you guys. And the resolution says, when the proceeds from the sale of the property are available to the city, city staff will have the CFAC review the use within the context and the then current economic and fiscal conditions prior to transmittal of those proceeds to pay down the loan. The loan that they're talking about is for the new fire station. So I wanted to give some background on some history of that. And starting in 2011, so in the 2011-12 budget, there was words to the effect that the council has expressed an intent to pay down the USDA debt with proceeds from the sale of the Cloisters property when it is sold. And those words have been in every budget since then. And so that goes through 6 budgets and 3 different city councils. And given this resolution, I'm assuming that it will continue to be in the budget. So we're on to our 4th city council that this is the intent. So I just wanted to give that information to you. And so when it does come about, that there's a long history of the intent of that money, and hopefully you will abide by that intent. That's it. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Good afternoon. My name's Robert Davis. I live in Morro Bay. I hope that you have heard someone say this before, but you have not heard me say it. Your work is valuable, and it is valued by the City Council. You are the working edge of the financial affairs of this city, and your recommendations carry a great deal of weight to the council. And I want to thank you. You're all volunteers, and we appreciate your work. Thanks.
You're quite welcome. Robert, thank you.
Hello, Barbara and fellow members of the Citizens Finance Committee. My name is Marlis McPherson, Morro Bay resident, and sat in one of these seats until just recently, and I'm here for two purposes. First of all, I just wanted to say farewell to my fellow committee members, and I wanted to tell you how much I've enjoyed working with you, how much I've learned, and I appreciate staff. Susan, thank you. Craig, welcome. All of the staff. It's been a great experience for me, and I'm going to really miss it, and I hope we stay in touch. My second, well, I know we will, as a matter of fact. My second reason for being here is I missed the last meeting, and I had volunteered at the October meeting to do a little bit more research on a possible benchmarking study that Mr. Heading had requested. And I had prepared a research design, and we discussed it at the October meeting and realized that it was well beyond the scope of this committee to undertake. If we were going to do a good job at benchmarking, it was going to have to be something that we either hired out or city staff completed. But I did say I would do a little bit more research to see what was available and what we could do. So I want to just very briefly give you an update on that. We had set as benchmarking criteria cities of similar population and similar demographics, similar income levels, tourist-reliant economy, and a California coastal community, hopefully with harbor functions. The cities we looked at, or said we were going to look at, was Grover Beach, Half Moon Bay, Pismo Beach, Fort Bragg, Carpinteria, Pacific Grove, and Capitola. I did go to the next step, and I did look at all of their websites, and there obviously are, on the website you can see all of the city's budgets. So it is possible to examine those budgets, and somebody could do that. However, the presentation, the formatting, the categories used are different, so it would take some time to really get comparable data across all of the cities. And it would obviously require some telephone interviews to kind of confirm and verify that you are in fact comparing apples to apples. You could collect some gross data across all of the cities, for example, general fund revenues and expenses, and develop some measures from that, such as city budget per capita. And there may be other data as well. It would be very difficult to collect comparable data on the number of city personnel because some cities use city staff while others contract out for services. And so if you looked at just number of personnel, you're not comparing apples to apples. The greatest difference that I found in my very cursory examination was the way that fire emergency service and police service is provided. Almost all of the cities included in the study contract with another agency or have a joint powers agreement with surrounding communities to provide one or both of those services. Only Pacific Grove hires city staff to provide both police and fire emergency service. The contracting cities include Grover Beach, contracts with 5 cities fire, Half Moon Bay contracts with Coastside Fire District, and also contracts for law enforcement and legal services. Pismo Beach contracts with CAL FIRE. Fort Bragg has a joint powers agreement, a fire protection district, to provide fire and emergency services. Carpinteria contracts with the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department for law enforcement. And in the Capitola budget, there is no mention of fire emergency services at all, but emergency communications is contracted out. So I'm just sharing that with you because if you recall last summer, the city manager basically recommended that we not continue with any further study to find out if contracting would be a viable alternative for police, and it was also decided not to pursue any contracting study with the fire department as well. So that's why I'm sharing this information at this point. We also don't know, by the way, whether contracting would save any money or not. There's no way to do that just by looking at this data. Additional observations, not systematic. Several cities rely on special measures similar to Measure Q to collect additional sales tax for specific purposes. Most of the cities use a staff city attorney, although some used contracted legal services or a combination of both. There's considerable variation in the amount of general funds allocated for streets. I noted that Capitola allocated $1,463,928 from its general fund for streets in its fiscal year 2016-17 budgets. And the last point I'm going to make, and then I'm going to forward this to Craig, and he can send it to the committee if he'd like. If you want to agendize it as a future item, you could. The Capitola completed a benchmarking study that included Pismo Beach and Carpinteria, and it was designed to assess the city's fiscal performance. Was it managing its fiscal affairs effectively? The city was based on comprehensive annual financial reports, and I'm not familiar with what that is, but if you should decide to continue, that would be a good place to start. So thank you.
I think they're referring to their CAFR reports. Thank you so much, Marlis, for that report. And as Marlis said, she'll forward to that. Greg and Susan, will you just put that as report received and filed? And then I think the conclusion is basically if we want to go further, then we're going to have to make a recommendation to City Council that they engage in additional research on this. But I think what Marlis has provided is very helpful, and we can certainly look at some of the general high-level metrics and make some conclusions. Any other comments from my colleagues? Okay, so I want to thank Robert and Marlis for their kind words of appreciation to us and wish you both success in your city council assignments. And then maybe Janice, who also spoke, did she provide a report on the information she had gathered? Okay, I'll try to reach out to her and ask her to forward something so we can have a receive and file. I did view her presentation to the City Council. I thought it was excellent, and we have discussed this several times at our meetings here. We've made the recommendation. Mr. Schmollinger followed up on that recommendation to City Council, but I think it would be nice to have that in the record, that we have another citizen that provided some information. I know previously we tried to do a lot of research and couldn't find the exact resolution that previously addressed where those proceeds would be, directed. So, any comments? Go ahead.
As I recall, we did have that because I had some email conversation with Ms. House, and we did know exactly what she said. That was there, so I'm not sure that she provided anything new. A major part of our recommendation was based on that knowledge. Recognizing that there was still no words legally binding it, and that's why the city council wanted to say, well, maybe there's some better purpose, which we had said also in our discussion. We realized that, if we have an earthquake that really is serious, not like the one this morning, that could preempt things. In fact, one of our council members tonight indicated there was something that maybe had been omitted relative to financial discussions. But relative to Ms. House's documents, I think we had that. I don't know if there's anything new in what she's saying, because I had gone back through and seen that exact wording, which again, legally did not say it shall only be used.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. I think there was no written documentation of a previous council. That's what we were looking for. It was all institutional, verbal knowledge of our recollection of meetings. But if she has something, we'll accept it. If not, duly noted. Okay, so now that brings us to number 1. On the agenda, the review of the 2015-16 unaudited transactions from the collection, known as the 1/2 cent or Measure Q. So, any public comment on item number 1? Okay, so I see what we've just been given are the questions and answers that we submitted individually. Is that correct?
Correct. So that's the collection of questions that were submitted at various times by various members and the responses that we prepared. So apologies for the bit of lateness getting that to you. Just took some time, obviously, to get through our files and do things like that. But we much appreciate these questions early on so we can, get down and dig into the weeds a little bit on the issues. So.
Oh, okay, all right. So if we could have 30 seconds to review these, because this is the first we've seen our other members' questions. If you guys would just look at this real carefully, then we'll proceed with our discussion. Okay, so has everybody had a chance to look over that? Thank you, Craig, for providing that. I think in the future we'll try to, especially where we have a big item like this, we'll try to maybe, I know you did a very good job of getting all the information to us earlier and asked that our questions be returned by last Friday, so maybe we'll accelerate some of that to give you time to answer everybody's questions. I think there's some value in each member seeing every other member's questions if we're going to have an intelligent discussion on the Measure Q. So thank you for that. Go ahead, Bart.
Is number 4, the Centennial Parkway project, is that question answer relative to Measure Q, or is that just something else?
That's separate.
Okay.
This was the total suite or package of questions that came in relative to the entire agenda.
Okay, because the heading said district transaction.
Predominantly, they all reflect the Measure Q or district transaction kind of issues or questions or little areas where you wanted to dive in. But that one, you're 100% correct.
Okay. Right.
So we'll get to that when we get to that item.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry if I misled you. Okay, so in our review of the unaudited transactions, let's see, who would like to start? Does anybody have any questions, comments in your review of that? Is the accumulated transaction listing that was provided by the staff, 9 pages long. And in general, I had a little bit of difficulty understanding the numbers on the very last page, the totals, because of the deletions and that. But I assumed, and maybe Craig and Susan, these were just total debits and total credits after you do all your journal entries and everything else. So I didn't try to balance that with anything in the, the 900, what was it, 821,000 versus 1.4 million.
Those were just corrections that were made. We do budgeted transactions, and we have them set up in the budget, and we do them on a monthly basis so that most of the departments don't get harmed by us jumping in and taking, several $100,000 out of their budget and walking away. We had started doing that with the Measure Q money, and that's not how that works, because that's the overtime. And the overtime budget, the amount that winds up going to the general fund is whatever's left over. So when we did that, it was already 4 months into the process. I saw it and I said, stop this and back it all back out. So we did. So that's what those were. Everything I crossed out, if I crossed out a credit, I have an offsetting debit to
That's
it.
what I noticed. That's why I didn't bother
Yeah.
asking the question. Okay, thank you. Let's see, who wants to start the discussion? Does anybody have any questions or comments? This is on the accumulated transaction, just a dump of all the transactions. Bart, did you have anything? Betty? Dave?
Yeah, I wanted to expand on my question on the Caterpillar skid steer. I see
Okay.
the answer, there was some kind of an analysis done by Public Works that indicated that leasing was a better use of funds than actually going out and buying the piece of equipment. One question that I did ask as part of my question was, is this piece of equipment being used for any purposes, any work for, let's say, the water sewer enterprise funds or the harbor fund?
We have no evidence that has been used for any water or sewer, other enterprise-related activities. So as much as I know about it, no.
Okay.
And then actually, if I can jump in real quick about just the straight lease, it's a lease to purchase. So it's not like we're just leasing it and then that capital, asset we'd have on the books is going away. So once we have our final payment on there, if you actually flip to one of the documents I handed out at the start of this, I apologize for the lateness of these as well, but the one that is the council agenda from March 24th, 2015. So it's the minutes from the March 10th meeting. You see that? Okay. So this is the meeting where if you flip to this second page on there, agenda item A6 kind of calls out when the award of the contract for the lease of the skid steer to Cat Financial was made. And then the following page kind of has that staff report that was presented before council on the 10th meeting, kind of explaining why they went this route. Flip a little bit further, and actually, this one's actually really hard to see, so that's why the early questions help us out a little bit. If you go to the last page,
The contract.
the last page of the contract with Rob Livick's signature, opposite Marcus Loops from Caterpillar. So if you look on the right under section 14, title, return of units, further along in the bottom of that section talks about how the leaseor will own the unit at the end of it, unless we kind of cancel the total lease as it goes forward. So if we didn't make all the lease payments, we'd have to give it back to Caterpillar. Make all the lease payments, we keep it. So lease to purchase agreement, so, yeah.
That's good news to hear, because that's, typically, it's sometimes hard to justify a lease of equipment if you're going to keep leasing over and over and over. You end up buying it 3 times. So I'm glad to see that clause is in there.
Certainly, and I'm glad we could dig into Dave's question on that, because I'm assuming that was his concern as well, so.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Dave.
As far as the amount, I haven't seen this yet, so I really need to look at it, review it, and get an idea of what their reasoning was behind doing this. They're talking about a total of $112,000, $112,500, $112,20 for the purchase of the skid steer, and I assume there's implements that go with it. And the total amount of this lease is equivalent to that? They said they looked at proposals from John Deere and Caterpillar that were roughly that amount of money. Was that for a purchase? The 112,57476 and 111,79837? Was that actually to buy the equipment?
Give me just a minute to look over that and get you a figure on what the total
Okay.
lease payments would be.
I think it's 22 a year times 5 years.
So the total on my smartphone calculation here, the lease terms under section 3, if you flip through the kind of the first page of that lease agreement, calls out for 59 monthly payments of $22.72. Excuse me, that's an incorrect figure. Give me 1 second. There we go. Your total's $114,380 and change. So that's based on the lease terms in there, which are 58 payments at $1,868.47 each, an initial payment of the same amount called out separately, and then a final lease payment of $2272.47. So there is a little bit of a jump from the quoted $112,512, roughly $1,800 difference.
Okay, so that was for interest paid on the loan, I assume?
Most
It talks about a
likely.
3.2% per annum interest. It looks at 3.2 per annum, which I assume is the interest on the loan, because if you're borrowing, if you're paying on a lease, you're going to pay some kind of a interest
Financial.
cost to do that, so. But it doesn't sound like it would end up being a whole lot of additional cost to do that versus buying, I guess is what I'm getting out of it.
No, it wasn't a substantial amount above that $112,000 you mentioned.
Okay. All right, well, that's all the only, well, actually, I did have one other question about this payment to Rick Engineering for $18,000. I had asked about contracting this versus having staff doing it. And let me just see if I can find the answer here.
It's number 7.
Number 7. So they updated a database and did field assessments to determine scope of work and general pavement condition analysis. So part of that question was, why isn't this work being performed by in-house engineering staff?
One of the great things about living in Morro Bay is that it is small. We are kind of a tight-knit community. However, that comes with the obvious drawback of not having a ton of money to have staffing for every single expertise going forward. So it's just kind of a case of economies of scale where we didn't have that expertise, so it was contracted out.
So the staff, the engineering staff that we have, the engineering technicians and engineers we have on staff aren't familiar with pavement overlays and street maintenance and that kind of thing? That seems to me that's pretty basic type of engineering work.
I don't want to make
agency.
assumptions based on their qualifications or their skills or what they're able to do. I'm assuming that our Public Works Director, followed by City Manager with his approval, took a look at existing workload and a specialty needed and made that management level call to move forward with the contract services. So.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm sorry, do we need any other additional information to approve item A1? Review of the audit, or we will accept, otherwise I'll make a motion, we accept the accumulated journal transaction as submitted. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Betty. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried, thank you. That will bring us to item 2 on the agenda, review of the carryover report from the collection of the general purpose local sales tax, Measure Q. So let's get the carryover report and take a quick look at that. See if there's, first of all, is there any public comment on item number 2? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. Susan, I looked at the carryover report and the numbers that we had filed last year with Measure Q, and it seemed to be in order. So that's why I didn't have any questions on it. That's found on the balance sheet, right? Okay. Any questions or comments?
I don't have any.
Okay, except as presented, go ahead, Susan, any explanation, please?
So there is going to be a little bit of unallocated cash, $55,000, and our suggestion is just to leave it and don't program it. It could stay and maybe build more for streets. If you want to allocate it to streets, you can do that as well, and that'll increase their amount. It doesn't hurt to leave it there and let it rest. It's a small amount.
I recognize it's a relatively small amount. However, we are trying to funnel as much as we can into the streets initiative. That seems to be the citizens' next to the WRF number 2 priority and the city's number 2 goal. So I'll entertain any suggestions from my colleagues as to, I recognize we could leave it there. I would prefer to allocate it to something specific, whatever that might be, that's consistent with the goals of Measure Q. Bart, Betty, Dave, any suggestions? Go ahead, Dave.
I agree with what your point.
Okay.
It should be allocated preferably to street repair.
Yeah, I think we should definitely say for street repair and not just say allocated.
Okay, absolutely. All right, Betty, why don't you go ahead and just make a motion on that, and we'll see if we get a second.
I make a motion that on the $55,000 that's left in the Measure Q account, that be allocated for street repair.
Second.
Dave seconded. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Duly noted. Thank you.
And so this will then become a recommendation to City Council that's in your letter that we'll talk about at the end.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Moving along, item 3. Is review of the 2016-17. That would be the unaudited transactions for Measure Q, equivalent to item 1, only for the next fiscal year, and it's only up to date. I believe it was through, what was it through?
November 25th.
Thank you. It was an odd day in November. Thank you. I remember that. Okay. So once again, any questions or comments on this? This is through November. It's called Accumulated Transaction Listing, No Payroll. I didn't have any questions on it. Any questions, comments, Dave, on that?
No.
Okay. Then I'll make a motion to accept that as presented. Do I? Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. So carried. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to item 4, discussion on the presentation of the committee's recommendations to the City Council. First of all, is there any public comment on item 4? And I apologize, I skipped item 3. Any public comment on these 2 items? Thank you. Close public comment. I'll lead off the discussion since we've been doing this for so many years. My preference, but I'll defer to city staff guidance, would be a very brief PowerPoint overview as we have done in years past. And we can usually present that to council in I can present about 3 minutes, and then depending on their questions, I'll be done in 4 minutes or 20 minutes. Any other comments here? Questions? Susan, you're familiar, would that be use the same format we did in the past? And that's where we would include, we usually have a recommendation sheet, put that right in there on the 55K that we just passed a motion on. And with new council, do you have any indication that there would be any different questions asked on Measure Q, like the expenditures primarily are streets, fire, storm drain, public safety. Anything else they would want to know about? Okay.
That's a great question.
Okay, well then, there's the question, and whenever we get on city council, feel free to fire away, and we'll be happy to answer, so. Do you need to schedule that, Susan, for the city council, or Craig or somebody, and let us know when, and?
I think the idea would be to include that in with the mid-year budget when we bring that forward, unless
Oh, okay.
the committee wants to bring it forward separately from that process. I think traditionally, that's how it's been brought forward.
It'd be a good thing to, I think. And when do we anticipate the mid-year budget discussion? Mid-year. Yeah, what's the definition of mid-year?
I think
Clarification.
they're trying to back into that date, which I'm sure you were as well. Most likely February,
Okay,
early mid-February, in that timeframe.
Either
Maybe
way.
February 14th, if no one's doing anything else.
well, then we'll all have dates that day, right? Okay, very good.
It's
ahead.
probably a separate item, but where does Measure J come into this discussion? Is that going to be incorporated into the Measure Q?
No,
Oh, it didn't pass.
no, Measure J did not
Oh.
pass. Measure J passed in Morro Bay with a 70.some%, but
Move.
we'll discuss that, I think, at a future one when we get onto the streets, but. All right, moving along, item 5. Approval of minutes, these are consent items. Approval of minutes from the August 30th special meeting. Whoever did that, I thought did a very good job. I didn't see any corrections on that. Anybody? All right, Betty has moved that those may be accepted. Dave has seconded.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, same thing, September 20th meeting. Motion to approve those? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, so carries. Item 7, minutes from the last meeting, October 18th. Any corrections, adjustments? Everybody's reviewed, excellent. Motion, Betty, thank you. Dave, second.
This is October 17th.
October 18th,
October 18th. I motion that we accept the minutes of the October 18th meeting.
thank you. All in favor? Approved.
Aye.
All right, that brings us to item 8. Discussion regarding the Centennial Parkway concept and votes on the following. Do we recommend moving forward on the concept? And do we recommend one- or two-way traffic on the Embarcadero? So, Craig, would you like to give us a little overview of that and why that was included in the agenda and maybe help us with our discussion?
Certainly, this definitely seems like an oddball to include in a CFAC agenda, and I think Barbara had kind of similar questions, like why are we looking at Centennial Parkway? Unless we're going to discuss the funding potentially behind it, but we're actually not looking at that at all. It's more of a conceptual level view of the project to see if that is something as an advisory body you would recommend we move forward on, yes or no. That's it. Not dive into the financials of it. As I think I've answered separately to a few people, we don't have money set aside for this project. We're not recommending setting aside city dollars, general fund, Measure Q, or otherwise for this project. More likely than not, it would probably be a developer-funded project if it does go forward. The idea here, like I mentioned, is just to get a yes, no, hey, we think it looks good, that's something we could pursue, maybe some tweaks, or no, I think it looks fine the way it is in Centennial Parkway, and that's kind of it. So, yeah.
Thank you, very good. Okay, any thoughts up here on that? Go ahead, Betty.
Personally, it's nice to have all these conceptual ideas, but we have so many things that are concrete that we have to deal with. And then if you're thinking it's going to be a developer's project, maybe one of the things that we really need is a developer's project on something else. And I'm really concerned about all the debt that we're accumulating as well. and how we're paying all this down, and what is the new money coming to the city going to be targeted for? You know, the property tax increases, sales tax, and all the other stuff. So I do have a concern about doing something that's ideological right now.
I think I'm in agreement. I don't think that our committee should be voicing an opinion on this without it having some tie to dollars, because I think there might be some implication that there was a tie to dollars with whatever we might say. I'm not against it, but I just don't think our committee, without dollars associated with the discussion, should weigh into taking a position, because it would be assumed, I would certainly assume, that we had looked at dollars and the financial viability and how we're using city dollars to be involved. So I personally would vote against supporting this, and not that I'm against it, but as a member of this committee, I can't support it because I don't see any dollars.
Well, on a conceptual level, as a citizen of the community, I think it's a good idea. I'd like to see it move forward. I think the Embarcadero and Centennial Park need a makeover. And I like the idea of having wider sidewalks, trying to get people out of their cars. I think it might provide some additional spaces for not only for tourists and benefit the businesses there, but also benefit residents of the community. If you're going down there and attending musical events or whatever, just a general improvement in the condition of the Embarcadero area, which I think everyone in the community enjoys. Having said that, I wouldn't want to see the funding for those projects take away from needs within the neighborhoods, like getting the streets fixed, for example, taking money from that priority to putting it towards the improvements on the Embarcadero, which I think, will probably benefit the city and in turn benefit the neighborhoods with increased TOT and sales tax revenue, but there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. I think the main beneficiaries from that improvement are going to be the business owners there, but there's no guarantee that doing those improvements is going to increase foot traffic, is going to increase TOT and sales tax without other improvements surrounding it. A lot of those conceptual drawings show very nice buildings, which would be private development, I'm assuming. And there would need to be some kind of public-private partnership in order to get these improvements done. But I agree with my fellow members, until there's actually an expenditure of public money to do this, I don't know that it's necessarily appropriate for this committee to weigh in on whether it should move forward or not, other than just being a good concept. And it's important for the city to have a plan, to have a concept with what to do with the area should that be able to move forward. I agree with that. So the money that's been spent so far for the designs and whatnot, I think is money well spent. But again, I can't say as a member of this committee that I say we should move forward with it, because I don't know what the way forward is at this point. So those are my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Dave. I would echo some of the same concerns. Conceptually, it's a great idea. We do want to encourage all of us as citizens to think out of the box and pursue, economic development and things that will either bring more tourism or TOT tax, more citizen involvement, more bike lane, more safety, et cetera, et cetera. The caveat with that is not only the funding is, we don't know what that is yet, and yes, we're not supposed to comment on that, but the reality is, I think every time you go out and exercise a supplier with an RFQ or something of that nature, you are going to devote staff resources to evaluating those responses, looking for developers to partner with, et cetera, et cetera. And to me, that right now, with the prioritization of the goals, with the WRF being number one and number two being the street initiatives, I think you're a little bit on, maybe a little bit of a slippery slope, as my colleagues have said, with what we're being asked to look at. So if we have to give some kind of guidance, then we're probably going to make some kind of a motion with a proviso in it that, yes, we think it's a great concept, but maybe we are not. Well, we'll see. Maybe we can't vote on whether you should proceed forward because we're concerned there's going to be a use of staff and supplier resources on something that may not be able to come to fruition in this next fiscal year. Maybe this needs to go in with the goal setting, and see what some folks think how high a priority that is. The concepts, everything were beautiful. They're very impressive. I mean, nobody would want to say no to that, but is there going to be funding there to do it? And if not, are we wasting our time devoting resources, pulling away from other more critical infrastructure needs?
How much has been spent and is planned to be spent by the city? I assume these drawings aren't cheap to create them, so in effect, we are spending city money now, and that has been approved through budgeting. At some point, your point is that development would be by others, but I don't think this is being funded by developers, or am I wrong?
The city hasn't contracted to put these together. I don't believe we've expended a penny of actual dollars. Maybe resources as far as staff timing, kind of coordinating that type of stuff and doing an analysis of it. But as far as producing conceptual documents, I don't believe the city has.
Who paid for what we're looking at? It's great if developers are doing that.
I can't answer that for certain.
I would have assumed the city was paying for what's been done.
Well, maybe they went out with an RFI and just invited unsolicited proposals, and, that's typical, but there's, at some point, there's...
I think it would be helpful in other presentations, because there have been many. I participated in a city, come look at what we're doing, which I really appreciated. But just to have an understanding of how much money is being spent, or in fact, that none is, which would be great, that somehow you've gotten someone to do this, hoping that they would be able to participate in being part of it.
And I'm sorry, I didn't ask, is there any public comment on this subject?
Relative to the financial aspects. Because the City Planning Commission, I assume, is really going into this.
I'll open up for public comment. Thank you, sir.
Who's he?
And Citizens Finance Committee, thank you for your input. This project conception, and I'm representing myself as a city council member here today, came in two sessions to the city council. There were city funds expended, if I recall correctly. RRM Design was the consultant that came up with the drawings that you see before you. There was initial presentation to the city council. The city council and the public gave input regarding the project. There was a second design, which you see before you now. And the direction given by the city council was that it be sent to all of the advisory committees, not specifically to look at your specific discipline actions in terms of, for you, the funding or the financing, but to give us feedback on your opinion regarding the validity of the project with the information that we have at present. Granted, the information is limited. Again, the expenditure, if I recall correctly, was somewhere in the area of around $30,000 to $50,000 to do the drawings and to come up with the concept and to look at the impact of traffic on the Embarcadero. The council, as I said, looking at it twice, wanted further public input, including all of the advisory committees, of which you are one. So it's going to the Planning Commission, to CFAC, to WRFCAC, to everybody, to just get further input. Conceptually, the design, specifically from a concept and a purpose standpoint, is to be a connector between the Embarcadero and the downtown, both ways. And the opportunity came about as a result of the city acquiring the DeStasio project property that occurred roughly 6 months ago or so. And that then was one of the goals that we had looked at in terms of making that connection between the downtown, like I say, and the Embarcadero. So I hope that just lends some credence to why it's here. The city also realizes, and it was discussed at the city council meeting, that there are not specific dollars allocated to fund it. And that question was obviously asked, and the answer to that was exactly what you've talked about, specifically developer public-private partnership, and depending significantly on development that would be paid for by developers that would participate in it. So I hope that helps. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Very helpful.
If I could jump in, thank you, John, and apologies. I did not know that we had expended some funding on that study,
Okay,
so
that's
apologies.
fair.
Hi, Robert Davis. In answer to Mr. Beckman's question, the genesis of the project was the goals and objectives workshops that took place during the first part of this year, resulting in goal number 7A. Goal 7, improve city infrastructure, facilities, and public spaces, and the A was Market Street Bluff Centennial Parkway area revitalization. Begin a public process and bring to council ideas for revitalization of the city-owned properties adjacent to the Centennial Parkway, including the Front Street parking lot, the Brannigan's DeStasio's building, and the city-owned parking lot at Market and Pacific. As a result of that, RRM was hired to pursue that objective and conducted, I think, 2 public workshops at which additional feedback was given to their first concept. So RRM has completed their part of the project, which is what you see before you. So now the council has asked all of the advisory committees to say, it's just an up or down, yes or no. Is this a project that the city should pursue? Thanks.
Thank you. Very helpful, Red.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Walter Heath, Morro Bay resident. I was invited to, in addition to the 2 public workshops, there were also stakeholder interviews that lasted about a half hour, and numerous people were interviewed by 2 RRM staff to get their sense. So, the business owners in the area and others, we work there. It's our adopted park area, so we're, asked about our opinion too. This is layman's, info, but so it would have to be confirmed. But I believe it was capped at 50,000, and so it was really limited. And I think I feel that we got excellent value for the money, considering that the amount of time that was put in. The president of RRM was in on the workshop, and 2 staff members on the public workshops. And as I said, there were 2 people assigned, to the project. But I believe it was capped at 50,000. That would need to be confirmed. Thanks.
Thank you, Walter. Very helpful. Appreciate that public comment. Go ahead, Susan.
So since I misled Craig and told him we didn't spend any money on it, and I was listening to everything that was going on, I remembered that one of the things that we had, one of the reasons why it looks like we didn't spend any money on it was the project initially was couched as the Embarcadero widening. And it was set up for us to explore possibly a promenade, looking at just widening the streets. And we had dedicated about $15,000 in strategic investment money that we had from the 14-15 fiscal year. So I was looking at that this morning and I thought, well, that was for the Embarcadero widening project, not realizing that the grand scheme is to go all the way down the staircase, open up the whole area. So yes, we did have some money that was set aside, but it was from surplus funds from the risk management fund.
Okay, thank you. And just for the history, I do know that over the years, we have various city councils, et cetera, and groups have discussed, whether it was a funnel or something to connect the Embarcadero to the downtown area. And, we've had some, even I think some Cal Poly students, designing some things. So this isn't the first time this has come up, but that's very helpful as to what you're asking. Okay, so what's our discussion, or go ahead, folks.
Well, did you have something? I was just going to say, I would recommend that we approve the concept without any funding. The funding is to be developed at a later time, and that we continue with our main goals that are the streets and other items like that, and just do that kind of thing. Okay. Something general like that.
Thank you, Betty. That's good. Bart, what were you going to say?
It's no big deal that wasn't there, obviously. Something was spent, so that's fine. I personally cannot, as part of the Finance Committee, support something that doesn't have included, for example, the way forward would be, the term public-private partnership was used. Well, okay, right away, that means that we're sort of condoning saying funding. So if that's part of this, I would be voting no until I know how much. So as part of the Finance Committee, I have no problem with the fact that a physical framework was created. I would have supported that, the 50,000. There's a lot of value in what I see here, in what was done for that amount of money. But for the Finance Committee to say we agree in concept with this, there are no dollars associated with what we're agreeing to. If I was on a planning advisory committee, that would be a different issue with the way I would look at this and how I would vote. But without something that talks about how this is going to be paid for, I can't support, as far as my participation in this committee, vote for it. Because I think to me, that's not what I'm here for without money being associated.
Okay, thank you. Good input. Dave?
Okay, I'll provide my input. I'll provide my input on the three questions that are being put before us. Recommend that the project, this is question number one, recommend that the project move forward. Alternatively, recommend that the area remain as is. I do not want to see the area remain as is. I think the area does need to be revitalized, and I'd like to see something happen there. So then I suppose I would support the project moving forward with the proviso that we understand how it's going to be funded, number one, and number two, that the funding of the project, as far as the public part of it, does not detract from needs or take away from infrastructure needs in the neighborhoods, like fixing the streets, possibly upgrading parks, and so on. So we really need to understand how it's going to be paid for. But conceptually, yes, I would like to see that go forward. I think the plans looked great, and I think the area needs to be refreshed and modernized, and I would support that. Question number two, provide whatever input the commission deems necessary on the revised design. I don't have any input on the revised design. I can't really comment on that. I haven't followed it closely enough. I know there's been numerous public hearings. There's been numerous input, a lot of input from the public and also from the Planning Commission and the Harbor Board. And so but I haven't really followed that very closely other than just watching, I think, the last meeting that they had in September, which I watched again in preparation for this meeting. So I really don't have any input on the design part of it. Provide a recommendation on one-way or two-way preferred traffic flow. An alternative recommendation could be to move a one-way demonstration project forward. Again, I don't have any opinion about whether it should be one-way or two-way traffic flow. I really think that's a determination that needs to be made by the business owners in the area, taking their needs into consideration. Our experts in the Public Works Department, our traffic experts, on what would be the best solution for that, and the public. I would like to see less parking on the Embarcadero. I would like to see parking made available off the Embarcadero. I'd like to see the sidewalks widened so that it gets people out of their cars and gets them walking and provides a safe means for them to do so, which right now is extremely crowded. The parking situation on both, having dense parking on both sides of the street, to me is dangerous for pedestrians or cyclists, and I guess it's dangerous for automobile drivers too. So I'd like to see some changes there, but I don't have any opinion on whether it should be one-way or two-way. A demonstration project might be useful to determine if that would work.
Thank you, Dave. Good comments. And I also wanted to address what my colleague Bart brought up about, I do agree with you in terms of the concept. It's a little bit difficult to render a decision on that. However, I think we're in a little bit of a catch-22, because if we say don't move forward, we will never know what the financial return on the investment is, if there is one, or what kind of partnership. On the other hand, if we do move forward, we are going to be expending some resources. I think minimal resources to evaluate it and move forward would probably, I could easily support that. So I think, Susan, what we probably just need to craft up here is, if we all agree, Betty started a motion, maybe we make some kind of motion with a proviso in it. And I'm thinking something along the lines of, and again, I'm just discussing, so if you guys want to help, making a motion that we that we recommend to the council proceed moving forward with the Embarcadero concept, with the proviso that we are not aware of any financial information, so there's no financial information associated, or perhaps with the proviso that it would come back to this committee once there is some financial information available to help evaluate that going forward on that. That would be one idea. And the second idea, I'm with Dave on the one-way demonstration project. We're not traffic engineers, so I don't think we're qualified to, at least I'm not, comment on that. I would defer to the experts there. You guys okay if I...
And I would think that you would want to put the third thing in there, that we're keeping the goals and objectives that are already stated with the streets, that we don't want any kind of development going, that we give up that idea.
Okay, in other words, if any of the funding for this has to offset funding already dedicated for streets improvement, then we would not support it. Okay.
Do we need to address the recommendations on the revised design in this motion?
I'm not sure about recommending on the revised design or anything like that, because I haven't really looked at it in terms of walkthroughing it and seeing all the different things. I would leave that also to the experts that are taking care of the whole situation, and then when it's really a little bit more definitive, then I'd like to look at it, especially since I'm in that area where it's going to be impacted.
Okay. So do we want to try to craft a motion here and see if we can get a second and vote on it? And I guess I'll start, let me try to, I move that the Embarcadero concept as presented, we recommend,
want to use the Centennial,
yeah, okay, so let me, thank you.
Centennial Parkway concept.
I move that the Centennial Parkway concept as presented, excuse me, I move that we recommend to City Council and staff that the Centennial Parkway project as presented can move forward with the proviso there is no financial information or justification associated with this recommendation.
I can second that.
We're going to do the whole thing?
No, let's do them one at a time.
Okay.
Okay, is that all right?
So,
Yeah. Otherwise, I'm afraid it's going to be too long. Okay, so Dave seconded that. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, motion carries. So that's motion number one. Did you get that? 4. Thank you. 4-0. Okay, so that's motion number one. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Betty. You want to do you try a second one? We'll help you. We'll wordsmith it up here. Is that okay?
Thank you. So, should I start with the Centennial Parkway project? Any funds will not be taken from the designated funds that are being used for the street projects. Oh, no, thank you.
Oh, your mic.
So that, I would say that the Centennial Parkway project will not take any funds from the street maintenance and projects necessary that are in our goals.
So let's talk about that motion before,
Yeah,
unless somebody
go
gets a
ahead.
second. I think that's a good motion. I'm trying to think, is that relevant here if you're not bringing us any financial information to evaluate that?
I don't believe so. I think you hit that with the proviso about the financial information, but you can
That we
certainly
already
include something
just
like
said
that
in
if
the
you would
one.
like.
In other words, we've just approved moving forward on the concept with the understanding there's no financial justification or information provided. So, and we would respectfully request we be allowed to weigh in on that in the future once there is financial information available. And at that time, Betty, I think we would have much more detail about where this funding's coming from and if it's being used to offset anything else.
Okay, and then, so the Centennial Parkway project concept, we're not going to talk about any way of traffic design.
Well, no, that's another, that's a separate thing.
I'm just
Yeah.
jumping around.
Well, no, that's okay. I think they had it in two different, okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bart.
It's very complicated. I attended one meeting on plans going on downtown. As I understood, it sounds like there was sort of disagreement on one of the developments. If someone got the approval to go ahead and they were supposed to put parking in for what was approved, and they haven't really done that. Parking's a big issue. So this is very complicated. To try and boil it down to something very simplistic as one way or not, I personally kind of, my citizen cap, I kind of like the concept of one way. I think that would do a lot for us. But financially, there's so many other balls in the air, like I said, relative to parking and other developments that conceptually, yeah, I mean, it sounds fine as a citizen. But the finance committee, going to Betty's point, I don't know that we want to be getting on record of saying, yes, we agree with this, without knowing the financial impact of really the overall thing, which parking is not a minor item here. If you can get a proviso, then I'm okay, but I'm not sure what we're doing. But I would go along with a proviso with those kinds of things, because as a citizen, yeah, it sounds like it might be a good idea.
So do we need another motion?
I think they are asking us on, does CFAC recommend, this is right from the agenda, the Embarcadero be open to either one or two-way traffic?
And I think we were just saying that as a citizen, we may prefer one or the other, but it should be somebody that is really familiar with traffic plans and safety issues, because there is a lot of things, you know.
So we may just make a motion that we have no preference, whether it's one or two way, that we will defer to the expert's opinion on, traffic expert's opinion on how that should be, addressed.
Also, the business community as well. They
And
need
the
they need to have
community.
input.
That's
and-
true.
And actually, even members
You're
of the
right, it might-
community need to have input. They may have opinions about that as well. I don't have any opinion about it myself, but again, that's something that I think that has to be hashed out.
I think that's great that we're being asked, because it sounds like we're trying to take the pulse of the community. That's good. If we don't have any strong opinion, we don't want to weigh the decision one way or the other. We think that you're absolutely correct. The business owners are going to be more impacted by this. General citizens that might frequent that area, maybe more than we do, or ride their bikes or whatever, number two. And thirdly, traffic engineers from a safety perspective. So maybe the motion is, the CFAC has no preference. We would defer to business owners, citizens, and traffic safety experts, and we would support a demonstration project if those three groups are supportive of it, something like that. Let me try to work on that wording a little. Bart, are you okay with that? Could you support? Okay. Do you want to try to read back what I said, and then I'll clean it up, please? Thank you.
Okay, you might need to help me with this.
Okay.
I have the CFAC has no preference on the traffic flow, and that you're going to defer to the traffic experts and business community, and that you do support a demonstration.
The business community, citizens, traffic experts, all three groups, for a recommendation.
Okay.
All right. Is that everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Do we have a second? Betty seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So that motion carries 4-0. Okay? Thank you for your patience with us, Lori. That moves us to item 9, discussion and potential recommendation for items for the city FY 17-18 goals. And I see we're going to get a handout. Thank you. Is there any public comments on item 9, fiscal year 17-18 goals? Welcome again.
Hi, yes. Thanks again, Walter Heath, resident of Morro Bay. I just, let you know, as long as I'm here, that a group of stakeholders in beautification, heritage preservation, and public art, we call ourselves the Citizens Beautification and Heritage Committee. We generate a list of unmet needs for civic beautification and heritage preservation and public art, and the minutes of our meeting are transmitted to the Public Works Advisory Board. But, just know that, that list of unmet needs in that area will be forthcoming, and if you would like to receive a copy of them, they'll probably be this week. If you're interested in seeing those, I'd be happy to send those to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Walter, and thank you for all the good work your organization does. I continually read about our awards, Morro Bay and Bloom, so yes, if you would like to send that to my email address, that would be great, and I'll distribute it to the committee. Go ahead, Craig, did you want to?
Yeah, just a quick background on why we're here. We wanted to obviously engage CFAC early on in the goal-setting process, kind of as Barbara mentioned earlier, for an earlier item to get a pulse on kind of what you want to see as a group and what would be some worthwhile goals and objectives going forward as we start to go through that process for 17 and 18. A quick note on looking at Council Goal 5B. The committee already did a great job at putting together that budget transparency goal. That should be posted online. It's not. I take full responsibility for that. I'll have it posted before the new year. So need to go through and do a little bit of vetting and a little bit of online work to get that going. But I stand committed to getting that done. So thank you for that.
Thank you. So, just so I understand, are we supposed to go through this and add anything we want added, or reprioritize?
Apologize.
That's okay.
So before you are the current year 16-17 goals. The idea here was just to kind of take a look at what we currently have as goals and objectives for the current year, obviously. And then to kind of get your feedback on conceptually what would be some worthwhile ventures as we go forward into 17-18. Nothing concrete at this point, just more conceptual level. Hey, these look like some worthwhile endeavors. If you have some for us that we can kind of take note of and kind of stockpile on as we go through that goal setting process, perfect. If not, we can have a quick discussion tonight, ask staff to come back with some more information, or come back at the next meeting. We can certainly do that as well.
Okay, thank you. I looked at them on the website, so the 16, 17, I assume it says updated. Are these the same ones that are on the website, or did you update them a little? The priority looks the same.
Exact same ones. So these were
Okay.
updated as of August 25th of 2016.
Oh,
So
okay.
updated in quotes. So it's been a little while, but.
When I reviewed it, my thought was they were quite comprehensive. I like the prioritization, and it seems to follow the money. And I didn't have any substantial comments, other than I think sometimes we are very lofty in our goal setting, and I think the proof of the pudding will be what budgeted priorities are assigned to each of these goals. And some things, as we know in the past, will just have to fall off. Personally, I would support doing 100% of fewer goals than 80% of many goals, but that's just my personal opinion. Any other comments up here on? Thank you.
Well, I was surprised there were so many goals here, but I didn't realize we all, even though I've heard about them and different things, when you see it on paper, you say, oh my God, it is a lot of. And I was just wondering if some of these could be collapsed into one little group so that you could see the whole concept instead of just little bullet items on different things. Because that way it would give us a better idea of how the money would flow to that particular item. But otherwise, I thought that they made a very comprehensive list of many of the things that were stated.
It's got it in one of my items here, but goal 3C, it's about the WRF. Seems like, I don't know why that's buried there. I think that should be part of goal number 1C, facility master plan. If you want to say for the selected site, so be it. But it doesn't make sense to me why there's this other one that says, well, if we don't pick South Bay,
go back,
then we're going to go over here. Transparency's a major issue, and the way this is buried in here is going to cause people to be concerned about what's happening, rather than literally putting in, saying, we have to develop a facility master plan for the selected site. And I guess
agree. I thought it was a holdover.
If it goes to a different site than South Bay for whatever reason, then it would be understood that, okay, you're going to have a facility master plan for that site. But the way this is organized here, raises a lot of questions for me.
And I think you're right, because a lot of these things change. That's why I said we should go through this and collapse it so that it's more together, and you'd have a better understanding. And that would go with what you're saying in terms of having fewer, much more specific, than having so many little details all over the place.
Well, I'm okay with the details once you have to start assigning budget allocation resources, that's true. But to Bart's point, I noticed that as well. It looks like it was left over from a previous year, so let's make that recommendation that we could just move that belongs under Site 1, or it will cause an issue, I'm sure. with the community. Okay. Okay, good.
And then the bigger point that both of you have made, the numbers here, it's hard to tell what's big and what's small. They're all kind of like equal. And, it seems like that there ought to be you're always going to have some item that's going to be larger than something else, but I think somehow grouping them, like traffic signs, traffic markings, you can have traffic issues and then put the two together. But having so many, I think, to me, diminishes the value of an overall document like this. Your goals ought to be some main ones with maybe some sub bullets, but yeah, I just in general don't like to see goals that are so many like this, particularly again when you can kind of say, well, we have 80 goals and we made 70 of them, but you didn't hit the two big ones.
Well, I agree. There needs to be some prioritization. My concern would be, though, like, let's say you go to the recreation or a couple of these where it says, let's see, like here's a good one, enhance quality of life. That could be anything, number 8. So you have D, pickleball court space. You have I, skate park. You can be assured that that is very important to the people that want either more or less or painted pickleball courts versus skate park for the youth. So I guess I'm looking at from a financial numbers. I'm okay with all this detail as long as you can summarize it. But like item number 8, how much are we allocating to all that? And that's where it will really come out, Bart, what we are supporting or not supporting. So I recognize it's a lot. I just think some of these are going to have a funding level of 0. Public comment, please.
Thank you very much, Marlis McPherson. I just wanted to add a little point of clarification at this point in the discussion that might be helpful for you moving forward. Mm-hmm. These, of course, are last year's goals. So it's not the goals, and what the council would like to see is your input into next year's goals. Okay. So I think it would be helpful to provide, if you have any comments about the way goals are formulated, you could certainly add that to your comments for next year in the goal-setting process moving forward. But the council is going to start having study sessions in January to get input from the public. They also wanted this year, for the first time, to get input from all of the advisory groups. And so I think, from your point of view, looking at the ones that have to do with ensuring fiscal sustainability would be really important. Mm-hmm. And then if there's other goals that pertain specifically to your charge as an advisory group that you think would be necessary or important to include for next year, then that would also be helpful. So I would not fixate at this point on these particular goals, because they may vary. Some of these have been accomplished, and that's already, and they will not appear moving forward.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's helpful to you, but
well, it's very helpful, because I thought these were already determined to be the goals. That's why
these are the goals we're working on this fiscal year. So
okay.
We're just preparing for the study sessions that will begin in January. So thank you.
Thank you, Marlis. Okay, so if we have comments on these, should we just get them to Craig so he can, would that be the right thing to do? Dave, any comments?
Yeah, I would like to spend some time thinking about this, and I don't really want to provide input tonight on the goals, with the exception of one that caught my eye here, which is Goal 2A, the street summit. That whole issue is going to have to be revisited with the defeat of Measure J, and we need to, I really believe as a community, we need to come to an agreement on additional funding in addition to Measure Q funding to address the issues with the streets. So I think there's going to need to be some additional funding mechanism, and it sounds like that the community is going to have to do it on their own at this point. So I'm assuming that there will be additional street summits in the coming fiscal year, and I think the discussion of a funding revenue measure, as mentioned here on the November 2018 ballot, I think would be a very important discussion to have.
Okay, I agree. So we will send you some comments on these goals, thanks, and then I assume you'll send us an invite or the schedule of that goal setting, and those of us that can participate and attend, we would like to do that.
Certainly, and as I mentioned, I know it's a lot to go over at one time, so it's the initial kind of pass. Here's what we currently have on the books. I apologize if that wasn't clear going forward with, these are 16, 17 goals. Some of this stuff has been accomplished, some of this stuff is irrelevant at this point. But going forward, what can we add to this? What do you recommend we add to this or change or revise, or things like Bart mentioned, addressing certain areas in here? So all that input would be great, and certainly I'll send you an updated calendar of when those discussions are going to take place.
This, all deference to Marlis, it does appear that this is maybe a mixture. It is somewhat updated, because I don't know that a street summit a year ago, we would have had a look at a 2018 November ballot goal. So it looks to me like it's maybe a combination of last year's with somebody starting to take a shot at this year's.
I believe that what's in yellow may be the updates.
Okay, well, it doesn't
Marla
really
says,
matter.
okay, 2A, I don't think
Yeah.
they'd put it yellow,
It
but
doesn't necessarily matter, because it's a moving,
it's a draft.
it's a draft at this point that we're going forward on is the main point.
It's to be used by you to help us to plan for the next fiscal year, right? Thank you.
Thank you.
I did have another question.
Go ahead,
I did
Dave.
have another question. Has the city manager made a report to council on this current set of goals as far as which of these goals have been accomplished so far, or is that something that's coming up in the future, near future?
I don't have the exact date on when those updates are brought forward, but I know he does do that. As far as the next date going forward, that an update will be brought forward, I don't know off the top of my head. I don't want to give you bad information, so I can report back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just another comment. I think it would be helpful to know that, because the new goals, I believe, will probably in part be built off of this set of goals. So knowing what's been accomplished would be helpful for me as far as making a recommendation on what should be included with this.
True, that's very true what you're saying, but we do know that the street is still going to be a concern, and we do still know that the water project is going to be a concern, and that's where the money is really going to be a problem, because we have the debt of the fire department building. We had a proposal at one time to get a loan for the street, and we were concerned about how much debt we can take on. So a lot of this is going to be the financial part. So that's my real concern. So I can't approve of too many goals, because I don't want to spend all that money until I know where it's coming from.
Marla said there is a budget associated, there's a preliminary budget associated with these goals.
Thank you. Do you want to? Go ahead, John.
I'm John Irwin. I just talked to Marlis on the way out, and she said there is a budget online describing the estimates for the various goals which they're trying to develop at this time.
Okay, thank you. Very helpful.
Can you point us to that, Craig, so we can
Yeah, I looked
find it a
online
little more
today.
easily?
I saw
That
the-
sounds fantastic.
I didn't see it.
So what Marlis is saying, that literally for these, however many items there are, there's kind of a dollar placeholder? Oh, that's fantastic. That would,
Yeah, I didn't see that. I checked today. I just saw the goals, but
Let me coordinate with Marlis on where that information might live, and I can forward that out once I have that.
okay. And just send it out to us. That'd be perfect. Thank you.
and if we can, Dave's absolutely right. I think we've got to have a Plan B for the roads, otherwise Ponderosa is never going to get,
Not just Ponderosa, none of them.
Ponderosa is what I meant. Ponderosa.
Oh, that's Ponderosa.
Ponderosa, it's a third world country road that we have
Oh, I thought you were talking.
over in North Morro Bay. It's probably, I don't know, I don't know if it's a worst, but it's got to be close to the worst. There's a lot of others that are not good, but we've got to go to something that's different than just $700,000 a year with the prioritization that we have now, because some pretty deplorable streets are never going to make it.
I was aware the city manager reached out to me. There has been a discussion on how we are going to, how the city might proceed with that. So, and I know they will come back to us with some input in that. So without getting any specifics, it sounds like we're already looking at that, and that's going to kind of tie in with the goals and the budget, and then how we might want to proceed. So. Okay, so anything else on the goal setting? Craig, you'll get that info to us, and then we'll give you some comments back, and we appreciate that. So for future agenda items, January, on our work plan, let's see what we have for January. Do you recall, anybody? Susan?
You would have been looking at the beginning of the mid-year
Okay.
reports, and that would have been the big one that would come to you, and the contracts. Because we would have December numbers in time to at least give you an opportunity to look at, to review those financial documents to make recommendations to council for mid-year budgeting.
So you said you would have, has there been some change, or is that what we anticipate getting from?
That's what you should anticipate.
Okay.
Because I think your meeting is roughly the 17th of January?
Yeah, the third week in January. Third Tuesday, whatever that is.
Yeah. Oh, it is the 17th. Okay, so
Yeah,
it's the 17th of January. And at that point, right around the 8th to the 10th, we should have pretty solid budget to actual numbers that we can, run for mid-year. Get that to you in time to have the meeting on the 17th so that you can review them and make your recommendations to council. And that'll all go into the whole mid-year packet.
With the Measure Q report?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And
Okay.
hopefully we can convince the city manager to allow you to do a presentation like you did last year, because I think your presentation was actually a little bit longer than just the 3 to 5 minutes that we'd given you before.
Okay. Yes, if we're going to include that, we might have to extend it, but yes, please ask for that. So I guess the only other thing I have is at the council meeting last night, they discussed the compensation study that was done by the outside consultant, and I believe 2 of the council members asked that maybe we consider that, but I think they were concerned about overloading. I've already reviewed that and do have some comments. I'd be happy to review that, and if maybe one of the other members here wants to help me, I'll get with somebody to do that. Is there a point of contact if we have questions or anything, Craig, on that study?
You asked the right person already. It's me.
Okay. So do you think they would be receptive to our comments and,
I'm not following who's they, and that's
the city council?
I would hope so.
Okay.
I certainly hope so. I would hate to have a situation where they kicked an item your way, anticipating your input, and they didn't, didn't listen to your input on whatever that matter was. So.
Well, that's why I was asking what was on the January agenda, because I appreciate, I've been adamant before with our council liaison about, not taking on too much versus what we can accomplish. And number one, the highest priority is the Measure Q expenditures, which we've gone over today. So if the only other thing is the mid-year budget report, et cetera, and we'll participate in some of the goals, then maybe we can give, I have some experience or background in some of the personnel in the private sector. So if we can give them some comments, I think that would be helpful based on what I saw last night. So
This compensation study is on the internet.
it's on the city council agenda.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So if anybody has anything, if you just send them, if you want to look at it, send me some comments, and I'll try to piece all that together, and maybe we can discuss that in January as well.
The compensation study is attached to the
It's city council
for
agenda,
last
yes.
night?
Yes, from last night's December 13th,
Okay.
yeah. Mhm, yeah.
It's not posted anywhere else?
Not that I know of, but
Okay.
it could
All
be,
right.
but.
No, it's not. I
Just look
believe
on
it's
the
on
agenda.
page 153
Yeah, it
of
was about there.
220, so it's roughly 50 or so pages. It gets
Yeah,
pretty
it was item
detailed stuff.
C3, it was towards the end, I believe, so.
C3, they got swapped to C1, and
Yeah, right.
still got out of here about 9, so.
I'm still a little confused on whether or not this being the goals, is this year, draft for next year, but one specifically is this, CFAC review and refine the roles, responsibilities. So if it was last year, was that done, or if it's not, that seems to be something we should be doing. Again, I'm unclear as to
Oh, no, that's a good point.
last year or this year, but since
I
that's
brought that
us.
up. I'm the
Okay.
one,
So is that, so potentially, that was last year and it's done then?
no, I don't think we ever got to it. Did we, no? I think that's on us, so.
Okay, so we
if-
need that in the next couple of months or whenever.
I think we should,
Before
yeah.
this gets finalized, well, or to do it or not do it, I guess.
I think we should do it. I think it's really, the onus is on us. My original contention was that was a laundry list of to-do things that thought was maybe a little overwhelming until we got all 7 members seated, which we haven't yet. We are extending the application period so that we can get some more members, and that is one, Bart, that's an excellent point. That is something I think we could, it's really a wordsmithing. If you want to take a stab at that, please do, or I will, or, go ahead, Craig.
Where?
And
Okay.
Bart, I'm sorry to cut you off. I think you make a really good point on that end. I think coming in maybe a little bit later in spring and reviewing the roles and responsibilities, once we have, a full year under your belt of operation, and see where things work, see where things did not work, and then you can start to develop your work plan going into next year, and then how that kind of ties into our future 17, 18 goals and objectives in the strategic plan as well. So all that stuff should kind of bake in together with your significant input on how that work plan will work, so.
That's a good point. It's all interrelated.
It should be, at least.
Yeah, it should be, in theory. Okay, great. So we have several other things we've asked about too. I think we just keep it, and we want an IT briefing. We've had several citizens ask about the legal expenditure. So we haven't forgotten about that. I'm just trying to prioritize and get to the high dollar stuff first and give the new staff some time to get acclimated. So, any concluding comments? All right, thank you all. Happy holidays. We will adjourn to our meeting Tuesday, January 17th, 3:30, Vets Hall. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.